Hello and welcome to Buddhism Made Simple. And my name is Tenzin Rabka, and in my channel, usually I explain Buddhism in a very simple word. But in this video, it is very different and it's very special because we have a very special person here, Dr. Miguel Reyes. I'm not going to introduce him too much because I would like you to explain everything. Um, so what we will do in this video is I'll just ask him some questions regarding Buddhist interaction with science and how science, from his personal perspective, view Buddhism. And I think it will be a very good interaction because we are a very special person, and
We're very good friends as
we
well.
are very good friends. Yes, when I was at Emory, Dr. Reyes was my biology teacher and a very good teacher, great teacher.
Thank you.
So, okay, so before we start, I just uh, like you to say what you teach and any other projects you have at Australia and
Sure,
at
sure.
Mexico.
So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Miguel Reyes. I am native to Mexico, as you may not know, and I have been living in the United States for many years now. I am currently a professor of biology at Emory University in the city of Atlanta. And I've been teaching there for the last 6 years, since 2020, right at the beginning of COVID.
Mhm.
And my focus really is biology, and my interests are evolution, ecology, marine biology, and really mentoring students as they come and they decide to choose a career in the sciences, especially, of course, in biology. And if you ask about other projects, as you may have guessed, I am very much invested in teaching abroad. So I've been teaching in India with the monastics. We've been interacting ideas and knowledge for the last 8 years, really, and
It's great
we
ideas.
go quite a few years back, almost a decade. And not only have I met beautiful human beings like my friend here, but the experiences have really changed who I am as a person. I've taught in India for 8 years. I also teach biology in Australia, in other study abroad program, as well as in Mexico. We just created a program in Mexico, and later this summer, I will be going to Mexico to teach a biology course for 5 weeks with undergraduate students
So
there,
you have been teaching all over the world,
all over,
all over the
literally
world.
all over the world. Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay, and then what original? Because because you studying, and then you normally introduce yourself as an evolutionary biologist to
Sure.
other people. So what inspired you to study evolutionary biology
That's a good
and
question.
science in general and
Mhm.
biology and evolutionary biology?
That's a good question. Yes. So if I go back to my early years when I was a child, my father is a physician. My grandfather was a physician. My grandmother from my father's side was a physician. So I always grew up in a household where science was very important. And I was exposed to science from a very early age, scientific books. My father would always introduce to me different stories about medicine, and he would buy me biographies of Louis Pasteur and all these
Mhm.
great scientists. So I grew up really with a keen interest in science. And when I went to the university, it wasn't difficult for me to to realize that I wanted to really embark on a career within the sciences. And I started sort of deciding where I should go. And the one that really made sense to me was biology. In a sense, evolutionary biology, because that is what gives you the mechanism. It allows you to explore and understand the mechanisms that explains the diversity of life. And that to me was very appealing. And that's where I
Mhm.
decided to touch my feet and embark on a career. And I have been there ever since. My master's was in biology. My PhD was in biology, studying physiology and the evolution of fish in Alaska. So I've been enthralled in evolutionary biology for many, many years now, over 20 years.
Yes.
And it's such a great, great, beautiful career.
Yes, and I still remember, at Emory when you were talking about evolution, you talked
Mhm.
about fish with the same species of fish with two different environments in
Yes.
cave, and one which evolved without eyes.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Yes,
Yes.
that's those are the cave fish. There are a few populations in Mexico where you have this habitat where some of them are in the surface and some actually thrive in the deeper portions without exposure to light. And what has happened is throughout time, the ones that are found in the deeper part that never go to the surface have evolved the loss of the eye. They still have an eye socket. But if you think about the power of evolution and the way that it works, well, they don't need eyes because it's completely dark.
Yes.
So they conserve energy. So they end up losing, the formation and development of eye. It's a beautiful story.
It's so amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so when you started in biology, because in Mexico is not a Buddhist country, right?
It's not what? I'm
It's
sorry.
not a Buddhist country.
Correct. Yes.
And also in the United States, it's also not known as a Buddhist country.
Sure.
So what made you, like, how did you get into interaction with Buddhism,
Right.
especially the monastics in general? And
Sure.
yes.
So when I was at Emory as a postdoc, before I joined Emory as a professor, previous to that, I joined Emory as a postdoc researcher, working with Dr. Nicole Gerardo in her lab. And also I was sort of learning how to teach, and I was learning pedagogy with Dr. Ari Eisen. Dr. Eisen is very much involved in the ETSI program. This is the Emory Tibet Science Initiative. And he introduced me to the program, and he told me about how they sent professors from Emory to India to work with the monastics here, and then the monastics come to Emory, and we have sort of this biphasic interaction going back and forward, and that to me was super interesting. And I told Dr. Eisen, I'm interested. How can I be involved? And a year later, I was invited to come as one of the teaching mentors at the monastery, the science center here at Drepung, Losling. And I was very fortunate because this was 8 years ago. I never thought that I would be coming back year after year. And I was very fortunate. I kept getting chosen. And ever since, it's been part of my life. My summers have been spent really focusing, at least half of the summer, working with the monastics here. And so the introduction was through Dr. Eisen, and it was really an introduction that changed not only my career, but the way that I think and the way that I teach and the way that I sort of evolved as a person.
I mean, like in the West, when we talk about religion and science, people always talk about the contradictory, like it doesn't go together, right?
Right.
So when you first heard of Buddhist monastics, and like teaching science, when you first heard of like teaching science in the monastery, what is your first impression?
Sure. To be honest, I knew very little about Buddhism. Yes, you may see it in movies. You may hear of celebrities that are Buddhists. Richard Gere is one of them. So you think of things about Buddhism, but my personal experience was really none. It did not exist. Coming here, I really got to appreciate and learn well, first of all, how complex Buddhism is. It's certainly a very, very complex, multi-layered philosophy. And that to me was something that I found very, very interesting. And another thing that I found very interesting was how it complements science. And it goes both ways, right?
Yes.
It complements science, and science also complements Buddhism.
Exactly.
And I am not a religious person, which is really weird because in Mexico, most of the population is religious. I am part of the people that are not religious. To me, finding this philosophy, perhaps you may also call it a religion, although Buddhism, I would not really identify it as a real religion, the way that you would imagine like a Judeo-Christian religions. It's quite different. If you want to call it a philosophy or something along those lines. What I found to be quite interesting is how it really complements scientific thought, perceiving reality based on evidence, on testing things. I heard the story very early when I started coming here. One of the monastics told me that Lord Buddha, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was this story that he said, if someone tells you that this is made of gold, well, don't just accept it, test it, make sure that this is true.
Yes.
And that to me is really thinking like a scientist, right? And to me, they complement each other, Buddhism and science. And to me, it was like, this is excellent. This is something that I can certainly accept as a beautiful philosophy.
Yes, exactly. And also, I'll ask some of the question, a follow-up question later on when the time comes. But here, as an evolutionary biologist, I'm sure, like in my in experience of teaching biology in monasteries, or interaction with other communities
Hmm.
in many parts of the in India or in the world, there are
Sure,
many misconceptions about evolution.
sure,
Right? People say, when they say about survival of the fittest, they have this idea that whoever is has the strongest, in a sense, like whoever has the bulkiest,
sure.
they will survive. No? So, can you, just from the evolutionary biologist perspective, can you explain what evolution, or what survival of the fittest in specifically what does it mean?
Sure, yeah, that is a very important misconception. There is a link to this famous quote,
Mm,
survival of the fittest. It did not come from Darwin. It actually came from an economist, philosopher, Malthus,
mm,
who, in a sense, inspired Darwin in the way that he was sort of approaching and thinking about his idea of natural selection. In a sense, evolution driven by different mechanisms, some which may be random, found in nature, such as genetic mutations, and some that may not be completely random, such as natural selection. They're based on your ability to adapt, right? So, what essentially happens is, in nature, there is variation.
mm.
Any particular organism within that population, you're going to find variation. Different environments are going to essentially have different selecting agents working on those organisms. And those organisms that are better adapted have a better chance of survival. It doesn't guarantee survival, right? But if you're better adapted, if you have those traits within your body, you may have a better chance of surviving, reproducing, and passing your genes. And that is essentially how evolution is sort of thought out as. You are thinking of the unit, which is, of course, the gene, which is what is passed down from generation to generation. And those organisms that are able to reproduce, survive, and pass those genes are the ones that are going to essentially be present within generations after generations. So that is, in essence, what evolution is all about. It's not really the strongest that survives, but it's the one that is better adapted.
Adapted to that.
So yes, there is this sense that there is partly correct that yes, in a sense that the organism that is best adapted with the better traits has a better chance of survival. There is no guarantee, right, that you're going to survive, but instead of survival of the fittest, we can say survival of the best adapted organism.
Okay, so now, when you say survival of the best adapted,
Right,
so human beings as a social animal
right.
depends a lot on on interaction with other human beings
Sure,
for their own
sure,
survival,
sure.
and for those for that survival, for that interaction, uh, from Eastern religion, or from, like, from Buddhism and from Indian religion, and also from many other parts of the Eastern religion,
Sure,
they focus a lot on compassion. They focus
sure.
a lot on such, on ethics for the as a mode of survival.
Right.
So, could you say that it also? Can I also say that, it is also that the survival of the most compassionate, or
I
survival of?
would agree with that, certainly. And we have to also think about the capacity of the human being, right?
Hmm,
Humans, with our level of foresight and level of intelligence that, as we know so far, supersedes all other organisms, right? Including the most intelligent non-human apes, like the chimps and the gorillas, which are our closest relatives. Uh, we're far more intelligent than those groups.
hmm.
We have foresight and we have hindsight. Our level of consciousness is also, as much as we can understand, much higher, much more advanced than those other groups. With that, we have the capacity to sort of overrule a lot of the rules that are given through natural selection, right?
Yes.
If humans acted in a purely Darwinian fashion, it would be a horrible, horrible world. Many of our human fellows would not survive,
Hmm.
right? The fact that we allow humans to live a certain age certainly violates natural Darwinian laws. But humans, with the capacity of compassion, with the capacity of love, have allowed ourselves, for very good reasons, to allow humans being to outgrow our age of reproduction, for example. So yes, in a sense, if you sort of separate human society from all other organisms,
Hmm.
we have survived because in many ways we have been able to counteract the limitations given by natural selection. And that is a huge benefit for human survival.
So it's more like our human ability to show compassion and
Yes,
empathy would be balancing
Absolutely.
with the
Absolutely. Do other organisms show compassion? It's hard to say. If you want to study it from the perspective of altruism, you could make the case that other animals do show compassion, but certainly not at the same level that
yes.
humans show compassion. So again, humans have been able to overrule the limitations and the rules which may seem cruel as stated and given by natural selection. And our own ability to overrule those actions, we have done so through compassion and in many ways through love. And that is very important for our own survival and even for the building and efficiency of our societies.
So I think you have more or less, in part, answered my next question, which is also, I think it's also blends with how close we are, how close our communication is, because
Yes.
the question that I've managed is all just continuing
Sure,
with our
sure,
own flow of communication, conversation. So my next question is like, Buddhism, places compassion at the center, the main center of human flourishing,
Sure,
right?
sure.
So in biology, is compassion viewed as an adaptive mechanism? Because the human, as you have mentioned earlier, without compassion, it would be a very different world.
It would
right?
be a very cruel world, yes.
Okay, so do you think like the compassion has been our ability to show compassion has been evolved to counteract?
Absolutely, I believe so, yes. I would argue that yes, we have the evidence that humans have evolved this sense of helping each other out, especially when you think of how societies have survived over millennia, over how societies have developed over time. Our survival as a human species, and we're separating ourselves from other species, right?
Yes, yes, true.
Let's make that point first. We have to separate ourselves from other species. Our ability to survive in such a real cruel planet, we have done so through compassion, through care, through familial ties, through familial love, and what I mean is, by loving our kin, by loving our closest relatives, which in a sense is not completely natural because it is not in the sense Darwinian, right? But through that ability, we have survived. We have actually gone through many different periods in our planet that have been extremely hostile. One example would be, of course, the bubonic plague in medieval, in what we consider to be the quote unquote darker periods of our planet in pre-Renaissance Europe, where we were exposed to this bacteria that was rampant and killing the population. Well, we showed in many ways compassion, unity, and a lot of us were able to survive this really dark period in our planet. Without that compassion, without that love, our human population would be very different, perhaps not as united and as balanced as we see it today.
Yes, probably we also need this level of compassion more so in this current
Absolutely,
world, right?
yes. There are a lot of things to say about our state of the planet,
yes,
our state of society, which in many ways is far from optimal, but we have to remain hopeful, we have to keep the compassion, and we have to really show that we care about each other. And that to me is very important.
Yeah, so and also from Buddhist perspective, I think you have mentioned it a little bit earlier. From Buddhist perspective, when we say compassion, it's like the meaning itself is that we have to recognize the pain, the suffering of the other sentient, whether it be human or anyone.
Yes.
And then also not just recognizing it, it's just recognizing the suffering and then also feeling it by ourselves is just empathy, right?
Right.
So compassion is our own wanting to alleviate those animals or species or humans from the suffering.
Of course.
So I think in this sense, do you think like from many other mammals, like as you mentioned, the primates and bonobo, they have this instinct of like
protecting.
protecting, and then also trying to minimize any conflict if they are arising, right? So and also in species like in dolphins, they have shown
very intelligent species.
So and many years ago, I have this experience of living with an injured crow for a few years.
Yes.
And I noticed its habit. I notice it's what it is doing, and I notice that whenever I give food to that crow, it always calls out other crows before itself. It is before that.
Yes.
So we see lots of social structure, social community, lots of harmony within other species. Would you consider that as as them showing compassion to the other species?
I would certainly say that a lot of the adaptive traits that organisms have evolved is essentially caring for their relatives, right? If you have a group of dolphins, which is example that you provided, or bonobos or crows, certainly we have seen this in birds, is that they will protect their families, they will protect those members that are close to them genetically. And that is hugely beneficial. If you don't protect your family, you may go extinct, you may disappear, right? So in a sense, they do protect the ones that are closest to them, at least genetically. Now, can we call this compassion? It really depends on how you describe or how you define compassion, right? Certainly, from a purely scientific perspective, we will have to define compassion in a very unique way to say, well, this is compassion. I will go a little bit on a tangent and say this is more about protecting your species or the members of your species that are closer to you, because there is this instinct to protect your family, right? We could, in a sense, call it compassion, and in that sense, it is a highly evolved behavior. Why? Because we do not want to die. We don't want our members in our family to die. So that, in a sense, is for our survival. So yes.
Yes. So I think I love your saying that the species show compassion because show more compassion for those who are closer to them,
Yes.
right? So I think it also resonates with. Would you agree if I say that we show more compassion if we become more inclusive? Inclusive in the sense,
Yes.
like if we try to include more people
Absolutely.
in our own communities,
Absolutely.
because it is show making you closer to them
Absolutely.
rather than being exclusive.
Absolutely.
So would you say that because His Holiness would normally he would repeatedly again saying like the oneness of human being, oneness of not just human being but all living organism as oneness, and he uses the reason that he reasons about this oneness as everyone wants to be happy and everyone wants to go away from, wants to be free from suffering. If there's some suffering, no one wants to suffer, right?
Right.
So would you say that because when we talk about evolution, it's just trying to adapt for their own survival of their own species.
Right.
So in a sense, one might argue that it is for self-interest as an as a species.
Sure.
So if someone argued that it is evolution is self-interest for the survival of their own species, can I also counter argue that compassion is also a part of self-interest?
Absolutely, yes. Well, so let's sort of make this division, right? If you separate humans from other species, again, I make the point that we have been able to move away from the selection or from the concept of natural selection. We have been able to step away and say, this is not how we want to live, right? We want to go beyond and perhaps improve our society. We do not want to live in a purely Darwinian sense. If we just abide by the rules of natural selection, we would not survive, for a long time. So we have to go beyond that, and we introduce a lot of feelings and norms which perhaps may go counter to the concept of natural selection. Other species is probably a little bit more difficult to say that, because we don't quite understand, at least to my knowledge, their level of cognitive thinking of how they perceive emotions, how they may perceive compassion. We could define it as an altruistic behavior for survival, but definitely for humans, yes, there is certainly a lot of self-interest involved, but as a general rule, humans have evolved the trait of care, love for the survival of our species. And I do want to say that I'm hopeful that it's not just merely self-interest, but rather for the interest of the survival of the species.
So when we talk
does that make sense?
Yes, exactly. So when we talk about Buddhism, like His Holiness would also summarize that, and also the many other Indian Buddhist scholars would also summarize the whole teaching of Buddhism into two parts. One is the wisdom, and one is the method. So the method would be the wisdom. The method would be compassion,
Mhm.
and the wisdom would be the concept of interdependence,
Right.
right? So I think talking about that, because there is one question from one another Buddhist content creator from Sankisa in
Right.
UP. His name
Right.
is Gaurav Shakya. So he wants to ask this question, like, how would biology view interdependence? As you know, in Buddhism we talk about interdependence as anything that exists has to exist because of depending on another
Right.
things, right?
Right.
So how would biology, especially on or specifically from evolutionary biology, or in general, like in
Right.
genetics, whatever it is?
Well, that's a very good point. A very good question. So, beyond biology, I also study ecology.
Yes.
Ecology is the study of living things, the mechanisms that unite the ecosystems in our planet, and so forth. That is one of the topics I'll be teaching in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula. And one of the things that I do convey to my students at Emory and anywhere that I teach ecology is the fact that all living things systems are intertwined with one another. There is nothing that survives on its own, right? You are all living species, all living groups, populations, families, all living hierarchies are interconnected with one another. That complements the concept of interdependence from the point of view of how Buddhism views
Yes.
it, right?
So when you say all living, do you mean like all living organism within an ecology? Let's say living
There are different
organism.
levels, there are different hierarchies, right? So you could start from the level of the individual, right?
Mm,
How does one individual survive? Well, it will depend on its mother. It will depend on the fact that it has to be fed by its parents. It depends on whether that system will provide the right nutrients. If it doesn't, it perishes, right? You can go to the level of population. Well, how does a population survive? By coming together and protecting each other, right? You can go beyond population through a community with different species, right? This is a concept in ecology. You have different levels of understanding ecology. In a community, you have different species. You have different interactions between species. You may end up with species that evolve together, right? This is what we call coevolution, where you have two species essentially depending on each other and evolving one by one. If one perishes, the other
other
one will
also,
also
yes.
perish. There are many, many examples of this in biology. Beyond a community, you have an ecosystem that you're introducing biotic factors and abiotic factors. You're thinking of the chemistry, the physics that hold together the ecosystem. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that all components of each system will depend on one another. So
So
that is what we perceive as interdependence.
so
Right?
and so an ecosystem in India, does it also depend on, let's say, an ecosystem in like in Mexico?
Absolutely. Why? Because there are forces that we understand, for example, wind forces, oceanic currents. For example, El Nino and
Yes,
La
which
Nina,
is
these
happening
are
right now.
exactly. And you know where they come from, though? They come from the Pacific. They have an influence on the eastern and the western coast of Africa. They will influence the coast of Australia. So, yes, you could have very, very different ecosystems very far away, one in India, one in Mexico, one in Brazil, one in Norway, and they will all interact in many, many ways. They are all under the same sort of intertwined forces, and they all are going to, in a sense, depend on each other.
Mm,
Let me put you a hypothetical. What if we lost the Amazon rainforest in Brazil? It would be hugely detrimental to the planet, right?
yes.
It would be the collapse of not only the currents in our oceans, it would be the collapse of a lot of northern ecosystems around the planet. So they all interrelate and they all depend on one another, even if they are extremely far away.
Yes. So
Does that make sense?
yes. So that is something that might be difficult for people to like understand, because
Sure.
normally when we say we should look after our environment or things, people just have this concept of, okay, it's just us, it's just the environment that I see. Beyond
Well,
the ocean,
climate
yes.
change is a perfect example, right? If we have certain countries that are polluting our air, our atmosphere, well, that has consequences global consequences to all other all other not planets, all other countries and all other systems around the planet. So we have to be very careful because we all depend on each other.
Yes, and also it's a very how can I say that? It's also a very delicate balance.
Correct.
And
Yes.
if some small things happen in a certain region, everything had a very big
Right.
danger of being collapsed.
Absolutely.
So I think it's also a great example of interdependence, right?
Absolutely.
Not just
Yes.
as an individual, but as a
And that is also one of the reasons why Buddhism to me is so fascinating. I always tell my friends that even though I'm not religious, I am as close to a religion that I will possibly ever be, and that philosophy, religion, is what I call Buddhism.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's a great thing. So when we talk about okay, now we have talked about interdependence. Now let's go back to ethics.
Mhm.
Right? Okay, now when we talk about ethics, I think ethics has also a lot to do in biology, right? Because I
Correct.
remember at Emory when you taught uh, in when you taught in the letter, and you talked a lot on ethics, especially when you talk about genetically modified
Sure.
organism, GMO,
Sure.
and also whether it is fine, like, or whether it is fine for us to bring back extinct animals
Right.
or not.
That's a
No.
topic that I love to talk about.
Yes, so
Yes.
whether it is okay or not, right?
Right.
Whether it will affect our, as you mentioned earlier, like the very delicate ecosystem, whether it will
Right.
affect it, because a food chain is also something
The
that
moment that you start changing the food web, it may
everything
end up
changes,
it may
right?
end up collapsing.
Yes.
Correct.
So for that, do you think, we can just talk about anything, right? But do you think every individual, do you think a person, a human being, a person need some sort of a spiritual practice? Whether it need not be a belief in some sort of a religion, it
Mhm.
may not be a belief in a creator or any religion in that matter, but spiritual in a sense, like living ethically based on their own way of differentiating which is good and which is
Sure.
wrong.
Sure. Sure. Sure.
And do
Yeah.
you think, like, a person need to have a spiritual practice for their own psychologically healthy life as an individual, as well as for a healthy society in
Absolutely. I
general?
think ethics are inherently tied to a balanced and healthy system, societal system. And your question reminds me a lot of Albert Einstein, who, as we know, has been one of the brightest humans that we have ever had in our history. And he would always mention that even though he was not religious in the sense of believing in a religion, he loved nature. Right, that
Hmm.
was his sense of religion, and that to me is quite beautiful. He was spiritual in that sense, where
Yes.
he respected nature, he loved nature, and he lived ethically with nature. And that to me is the correct way of doing things. Yes, you perhaps don't need a religion. You don't need to have a divine deity that you're following. If you do, okay, that's your personal choice. And if that makes you happy, great, more power to you. Um, but I do think that we have this very important link with ethics. We have to respect our planet. We have to understand that a lot of decisions that we make, especially with technology, going back to the topic of, how far have we gotten with our medical technology, with medical engineering, with genetic engineering, with bringing back extinct animals. That is a very sort of topic that is highly controversial. We have to
Yes.
be very careful, right?
Yes.
Because
Sure.
we may be happy of engineering a species, but there are a lot of consequences that we are not sure are going to be beneficial for us.
Yes.
So we have to put ethics in the forefront of our thinking and our respect for the planet. Do we need to be spiritual? If that means loving nature, having an ethical respect for nature, absolutely. I think that is a requirement for having a stable, healthy planet. The moment that we lose our ethic point of view, we get into a lot of very negative consequences.
I think it's a very great conversation.
I think so too. Yeah,
Yes.
we're having a lot of fun, and I think
Yes.
whenever we are able to share such, interesting worldviews, the Western worldview with the Eastern worldview, that is very fascinating to
Yes.
me. And I believe I have learned a lot more from you than the limited knowledge that I can share with you. So I just want to tell my audience that the audience that I'm really thankful to have met you. You're really one of my close friends. I love you as a human being. You are really a beautiful person, and we may joke and we may laugh, but deep down, I have learned so much from you. You have really no idea how
I have
much.
no idea how what I've taught you. Okay, then before we stop, I'll just ask you finally.
Yeah,
When we talk about religion, in the past also we have like monastics have lots of um, com- input into the science. Let's say Darwin,
sure,
no,
sure.
not so sorry, genetics,
Hmm.
mental
Mendel. Hmm.
monk, right? So
Well, Darwin was also in his early years. He was he was a young Earth creationist. So
uh
he actually believed that the Earth was quite young. It was through his travels and through his observations that he eventually changed his mindset. But
mm,
he during that time, a lot of the people were very religious, and
yes.
Darwin was one of them.
Yes, so yeah, so as you mentioned, Darwin and Mendel. No,
Hmm.
here normally people talk about Mendel a lot because as a monk,
Right.
you
I
know,
mean, you make that connection.
yes, people
Absolutely.
make a connection.
Sure.
So from your perspective, you have seen monastics here studying from morning till evening
Yes.
till night,
Yes.
11 p.m. debating,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So and also from your experience of teaching the monastics,
Hmm.
you and them the way they ask questions.
Sure.
So do you see like Buddhist practitioners, especially monks and nuns,
Hmm.
uh, for making? Do you see there's only role for the Buddhist practitioners for making world a better place to live for the next generation?
Yes.
Like like whether it be environmental, social, or any role. Because when we talk about Buddhist monastics or Buddhist monks and nuns, in our community, people prioritize going to retreat in very remote places.
Right.
So that's for their own self-realization, things
Right.
like that.
Right.
And do you see like there's any other roles that people like monastics can play in making like in giving any contribution?
Absolutely. So the one thing that really impresses me, and I'm very happy to see this every time I teach, every day that I'm here teaching with the monastics, and I see how they react to the presentations that I give them, to the topics that I cover with them, is their keen interest in learning something new. And that's not something that I see even with the students back home, back at Emory. Yes, I love my students back home. I think they're great students. But here, the level of interest of learning, it's completely unmatched, right? And that to me gives me so much hope for our future because I see these people that are just so eager to learn something new and to apply it. And they are so committed to their philosophy and they're so committed to the learning that I think, well, these are the people that are going to have a major influence in our future. And if we link this interest of scientific knowledge to their level of their ability to show compassion and to teach compassion, that is a great recipe for bettering our planet, for bettering our society. And I cannot think of really of any other set of people that would have the same tools to have so much positive influence into our future. And that gives me so much hope, right? It brings me so much happiness to see how they ask questions. At the moment that you say, are there any questions to the topic that I'm covering? Everybody raises their hand to the point where like, oh, I need to answer all these questions. But it's really a beautiful, beautiful concept when they want to do is learn and apply that learning into their lives. That is a great recipe for really improving our planet. So
So
they become essentially, to go back to your question, they become essentially a very powerful role model
mm,
to show compassion ethically, as well as understanding the concepts through a scientific lens. That to me is beautiful.
so
Yeah.
if you were to meet a monk, excluding me, let's say you meet a monk, let's say you meet a student you have taught here in
Sure.
monastery, and if you were to give an advice or give uh, a recommendation or an advice for him, like no, in future I think it is good if you do this or this, what advice would you give to a monastic for because they have their own way of studying a lot,
Sure,
right?
sure.
On the top of that, what advice would you give? Like, would you just tell him, okay, yeah, you can just study as
So I may be wrong about this, but my perception is that monastics tend to memorize a lot through their books, their chanting, and their prayers. This may be more memorization based. What I do tell my students is don't worry about memorizing the science, but rather learn the concept and
mm,
apply it, right? That may be slightly different on how they study and how they apply their knowledge, their Buddhist knowledge on the way that they pray and on their daily activities. Science may be a little bit different. Don't memorize things, but rather understand it and learn how to apply it in the real world. And that may be a little bit of a different way of looking
no,
at the world,
no, I
right?
think I love your way of saying don't
Mm-hmm.
memorize but
Mm-hmm.
apply it, because
Yes.
um it no from Buddhist perspective, applying onto your own self, whatever
Yes.
you studied.
Yes.
So from science, maybe it may be application, applying it on the experiment or
Yes.
whatever, right?
Yes.
From Buddhist, maybe don't memorize it, try to understand it and apply it on yourself,
Yes.
so that when you explain it, you can explain it from your own experience,
Absolutely,
right?
and that's what we do.
Yes.
Do I know everything in biology? Of course not. I know a minute section of biology,
Mm-hmm.
and even that, every day we are getting a better understanding of biological concepts, and we always try to keep up with that knowledge that we're always receiving every day. But what we try to do as mentors is to share our passion for biology, for science, how to think like scientists, and to really be able or learn to use evidence as a tool for progress, for acceptance of facts, and really just go with what you become passionate about. And that is, I think, what scientists are good at.
And just one last thing
Sure.
before we go away.
Sure.
um, just now I've asked you what advice would you give to a monk for
Yes.
monastics, and I love your advice, or I love your way of as a teacher.
Thank you.
That's a great thing. Now, if I turn it the other way around, like there are lots of people who regard themselves as a Buddhist, but no, not it's just in the name. No, people say no, I'm a Buddhist.
But they may not act like it.
No,
Is that
not
what?
at like in the sense like in Western countries as well. People may identify themselves as a Christian,
Mhm.
identify themselves as any religion,
Right.
but are not practicing, like not a practicing Christian.
Right.
Similarly, in also here in Buddhist community, there may be many people, many Buddhist people, whether it's doesn't matter which region they are
Right.
from.
They may call themselves
Yeah,
Buddhists,
yeah,
but
they
they
may
don't really
identify themselves
apply
as
it. Right.
Buddhist, but no, identify themselves as a Buddhist in a sense. They may have an altar in the home, or they may go to a temple
Sure.
once in a while, but not a practicing Buddhist.
Right.
So, having interacted with monastics, having interacted with scholars, because I remember like few days ago you said you have a very great conversation with Kishila
Correct.
Negi,
Yes.
and in that interaction it wasn't that long, right? Maybe
No.
an
No. It
hour.
was 40 minutes or
Yes,
so.
and you said no, you had no it no, you had a great impression on that.
A little bit intimidating.
Yes. Yes. So, for that, no, what can you say to those people? Like, do you think that if they start to touch into some aspect of Buddhism,
Right.
would they benefit from the teaching for their own personal life, in their own personal
Right.
life, or
Right.
things like? Because no, if I say it, it seems like no, I'm because as a monk
Right.
people say like no, okay, because we are Buddhists we should do that. It seems
Right.
like no. So from a scientist perspective, from someone who's not a Buddhist
Right.
but has had a long time of interacting with
Right.
Buddhists and
Right.
have lots of discussion. But do you think like those people who identify themselves as a Buddhist but don't
In
practice that much,
practice.
don't
Right.
study much, do you think it would be helpful, beneficial for them if they do a little bit of digging into the teachings of Buddha?
Absolutely. So, what I would recommend is to be mindful of what the teachings are, right? And open your ears. No, not your ears. Open your eyes and listen to what the teachings or the concepts may be. Now, I am not a Buddhist, like you mentioned,
Mm.
but I have tried to learn about it. I have tried to be, I'm looking for the word, not compassionate, but be patient in what the monastics are teaching me, right? And it may not be always easy because I may throw a lot of different concepts or ideas or stories, and you may be overwhelmed.
Yes, sure.
But you have to be patient. Be like one at a time. Just take it slowly and learn at your own pace. And it may take time. It may not come quickly, but you may see that it's going to start changing you. How if I was to give suggestions to someone that may not be practicing Buddhism, but they may call themselves Buddhist, I may tell them, listen, look inwards and see what's missing. What is it that could be improved? And it may not be an easy question to ask yourself. It may not be a comfortable question that you can ask yourself. It takes effort. It takes a bit of courage to do so. But I do recommend that you be patient with yourself. We all make mistakes as human beings.
Absolutely.
I have made plenty of mistakes in my life. And we just have to understand that we are by no means perfect, but we have to be patient to all the learning process that we're going through. And that would be my recommendation. Be patient, look inwards, and really try to open your eyes to what those experiences may be.
Yes. And as we mentioned in the beginning, like try to, as someone examines a gold, just try to look at,
explore it, and ask yourself, is this really gold?
And if something is helping you, just take it. Absolutely. If it is not, then just leave it.
Absolutely. Right? There is no shame. There's no shame in saying I don't want this or I want that. And we all have different journeys. We all have different interests in life. We all have different passions, and that's okay. And that is what makes humans so interesting. The fact that we show so much variation. Going back to the biology, right? We're all different. And we all have different experiences. We all have something different to share with one another. But we just have to open our eyes to what those sharing, to what those experiences that people are sharing with us can be. And that would be my suggestion.
I think I'll have to think on that for another hour because it's so beautifully worded.
Thank you.
So I don't want to take much time, So it's a great thing for us to have this.
My friend, thank you very much.
So happy to see that. So happy.
And I will be departing India in really a couple of days. And I just want to again share with our audience that one of the things I most look forward to when I come here is the teaching, my experience with the monastics, and spending time with this awesome person that I really deeply love and I really care about.
Eating, laughing together.
Eating together, laughing together, joking with each other, making each other laugh. We do so because I think we care about each other, and we show a deep sense of love for each other. And you're really one of my favorite human beings in this planet. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a great thing.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
And thank you so much for the viewing it. And then maybe next year,
subscribe to the YouTube channel. Buddhism, Buddhism Made Easy. I love it. I just subscribed, so I'm gonna be learning more about it.
And next year, if you have any questions to any scientists like evolutionary biologists, or if you have any questions on neuroscience or physics or its relation with Buddhism, just leave it in the comment. And next year, let's see who we can invite.
Wonderful.
Till then,
thank you so much. Bye bye.